At exactly 4:30 p.m., while the White House celebrated a billion-dollar Saudi deal, one woman in New York was calculating a different kind of price. The cost of 3,000 lives, a murdered journalist, and democracy's silence. Letitia James picked up her pen and began writing words that would shake the foundations of power. The people of New York versus the marble floors of the New York State Capitol building have witnessed many battles, but none quite like this. In her corner office overlooking Albany, Attorney General Letitia James sits surrounded by towers of legal documents, each one representing a life interrupted, a family shattered, a truth buried beneath layers of diplomatic immunity and oil money. The office itself tells a story. Law books lined up like soldiers, framed photographs of civil rights heroes on the walls, and a small bronze statue of Lady Justice whose blindfold seems more like a challenge than a symbol. The television in the corner flickers with footage from earlier that day. Trump shaking hands with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, both men smiling for cameras while families of 9/11 victims protest outside, their signs reading "Justice delayed is justice denied," and "Remember our loved ones." The sound is muted, but James can read Trump's lips as he dismisses reporters' questions with practiced ease. She's seen this performance before. The deflection, the gaslighting, the casual dismissal of accountability, as if justice were a luxury America couldn't afford. Things happen, Trump had said when pressed about Jamal Khashoggi's brutal murder. Those two words echo in James's mind like a judicial death sentence for accountability itself. She stares at the photograph on her desk, not of her family but of the Twin Towers on a clear September morning in 2000, before the world changed, before power learned it could murder truth in broad daylight and call it diplomacy, before presidents shook hands with killers and called it foreign policy. The photograph shows the towers in perfect morning light, their steel and glass reaching toward a cloudless sky. She touches the frame gently, remembering that by noon that day, both towers would be gone, along with 20,977 innocent people whose only crime was going to work on a Tuesday morning. But here's what Trump doesn't understand about Letitia James. She's not just an attorney general. She's a woman who grew up in Brooklyn, who watched her neighbors board trains to Manhattan that morning and never come home. She's a prosecutor who spent her career learning that when power says things happen, it usually means we made things happen. More importantly, she's someone who understands that justice isn't a political position, it's a moral imperative. She learned this lesson early, watching her mother clean office buildings in Manhattan while studying law by night, understanding that the powerful only respect power when it's wielded by someone unafraid to use it. Every case she's prosecuted, from corrupt police officers to predatory landlords to billion-dollar corporations, has taught her the same truth: those who profit from injustice will never voluntarily choose justice. The intercom buzzes. "Ma'am, the 9/11 family's legal team is here." James straightens her blazer, the same deep red she wore when she announced the Trump Organization investigation, the same color she chose when she knew she was walking into a war. "Send them in." 3 lawyers enter, followed by a man in his 50s, whose hands shake slightly as he carries a worn folder. Brett Eagleson, whose father John died in the South Tower, has been fighting this battle for 24 years. His eyes carry the weight of every failed lawsuit, every dismissed motion, every time someone in power told him that justice was complicated. Behind him walks Sarah Chen, lead attorney for the 9/11 families, her briefcase heavy with depositions that read like a horror novel. Testimonies of Saudi officials who suddenly developed amnesia when questioned under oath, bank records that disappeared into diplomatic black holes, witnesses who stopped returning phone calls after receiving visits from men in expensive suits. "Miss James," he begins, his voice steady despite everything. "We've been watching the news." She nods, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. "As have I. And I have a question for you, Mr. Eagleson. How long are we going to let them tell us that murder is just things happening?" The lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, spreads documents across the mahogany table. "The federal case is moving forward. Judge Daniels denied Saudi Arabia's motion to dismiss. We have discovery, we have depositions scheduled with Saudi officials. But, James's voice cuts through the room like a blade through silk. But the President of the United States, just gave Crown Prince Mohammed a platform to deny everything on live television while sitting in the Oval Office. Sarah's voice tightens with the frustration of 2 decades fighting an enemy that owns judges, politicians, and apparently presidents. It's a signal to every court, every jury, every potential witness. The highest office in the land just said that the man who ordered Khashoggi's murder knew nothing about it. We've lost 3 key witnesses in the past 6 months. 2 relocated suddenly to countries without extradition treaties. The third simply disappeared. James stands, moving to the window that overlooks the Hudson River. In the distance, she can see the haze of Manhattan, where on clear days you can still feel the ghost of smoke that rose from ground zero. Tell me about the New York connection. Brett opens his folder with the reverence of someone handling sacred documents. 15 of the 19 hijackers trained in Florida, but the money came through networks that touched every major city on the East Coast, including right here. He slides a photograph across the table. This is Omar al-Bayoumi, Saudi intelligence officer. He rented an apartment in San Diego for 2 of the hijackers, but before that he was in New York, multiple times, meeting with people connected to the Saudi consulate here. Financial records? Buried, Sarah replies, her voice carrying the weight of investigative dead ends and bureaucratic stonewalling. The Saudis claim diplomatic immunity for most of it. But we've traced approximately $12 million through New York banks between charitable foundations, they called them, funding for educational purposes. Educational purposes like flight training and bomb-making manuals. She opens a thick binder, revealing bank transfer records that read like a terrorist financing manual. Look at this. Monthly payments of $50,000 to $100,000 flowing from the Saudi embassy directly to accounts linked to al-Qaeda operatives. The paper trail leads right through Chase Manhattan, Citibank, and Deutsche Bank's New York offices. James turns back to face them, and something in her expression has changed. The careful diplomatic mask is gone, replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. Charitable foundations operating in New York State fall under our jurisdiction. The room goes quiet. Even the traffic noise from the street below seems to pause. Ma'am, Sarah's voice is careful. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet. James moves back to her desk, fingers drumming against the wood. But I am observing that while the federal government may choose to shake hands with killers and call it diplomacy, the state of New York has never been particularly diplomatic about protecting its people. She reaches for a thick file marked Foreign Agents Registration Act, violations. The pages inside are crisp, newly printed, still warm from the state's investigative machinery. Did you know that between 1999 and 2001, at least 47 Saudi nationals entered New York State on diplomatic visas that were later found to be irregularly issued, and that 32 of those individuals had connections to organizations that the federal government now acknowledges funded al-Qaeda operations? Brett's hands have stopped shaking. For the first time in years, he's looking at someone in authority who isn't telling him to wait, to be patient, to understand the complexities of international relations. What are you saying, Miss James? She opens the file, revealing pages of financial records, bank transfers, corporate filings, names and dates and dollar amounts that tell a story of money flowing from Riyadh to New York, to Florida, to a flight school where 19 men learned to fly, but not to land. I'm saying that the state of New York has jurisdiction over crimes committed within its borders. I'm saying that money laundering doesn't become legal just because it's wrapped in diplomatic immunity. I'm saying that murder doesn't become acceptable just because the president calls it things that happen. James pauses, letting the weight of her words settle. But more than that, I'm saying we have RICO violations, conspiracy charges, and accessory to murder cases that bypass federal foreign policy entirely. Every wire transfer that passed through a New York bank, every meeting that took place in a Manhattan hotel, every check written in a New York office, state jurisdiction, state law, state prosecution. She pulls out another file, this one marked precedent cases. We prosecuted the mob this way. We went after Wall Street criminals this way. We dismantled corruption networks this way. The Saudis aren't special. They're just another criminal enterprise that made the mistake of doing business in New York. The afternoon sun slants through the office windows, casting long shadows across the legal documents. In that light, the papers look like what they are: evidence of a conspiracy that reached into the heart of American power and found it surprisingly willing to look the other way. But here's what makes this moment different from all the others. Letitia James isn't looking the other way. She's looking directly at the evidence, at the patterns, at the 24 years of justice denied and called it something else. Her phone rings. The caller ID shows White House Chief of Staff. She lets it ring, once, twice, 3 times. Each ring is a reminder that somewhere in Washington powerful men are realizing that their carefully crafted narrative is about to meet New York state law, that their billion-dollar arms deals and oil diplomacy are about to collide with a woman who learned to fight in the Brooklyn projects and refined her skills prosecuting Manhattan's untouchable elite. Ma'am, Sarah's voice is tight with possibility, hope mixing with 24 years of disappointment. If you're saying what I think you're saying, I'm saying that every Saudi official who facilitated terrorist financing through New York state banks violated state law. I'm saying that every corporation that knowingly processed blood money can be held accountable under state commerce regulations. I'm saying that diplomatic immunity doesn't extend to New York state criminal prosecution for crimes committed against New York citizens. The phone stops ringing, then immediately starts again. James looks at the caller ID, then at the 3 people across from her who have been fighting for justice longer than some people have been alive. She reaches over and turns the phone face down. The federal government may choose to treat murder as a diplomatic inconvenience, she says, her voice steady as steel. But in New York, we call it what it is. She picks up her pen, the same Mont Blanc she used to sign the Trump Organization indictments, the same pen that has signed dozens of complaints against powerful men who thought their money could buy them immunity from consequences. Mr. Eagleson, how would you feel about adding the state of New York as a co-plaintiff in your federal case? Brett's voice breaks slightly. I'd feel like my father might finally get justice.
Good. James begins writing in her precise handwriting. Because while the president is busy explaining why murder is just things that happen, I'm going to show him what happens when those things happen to New Yorkers.
Outside, the late afternoon traffic hums through Albany's streets. Somewhere in Washington, a president is dining with a crown prince, celebrating billion-dollar arms deals and calling it diplomacy. Somewhere in Saudi Arabia, a murdered journalist's body lies in an unmarked grave while his widow fights for justice from exile. But in this office, in this moment, justice is no longer an abstract concept. It's a legal document being drafted in real time by a woman who learned long ago that power respects only one thing: the willingness to use power against it. The intercom buzzes again. Ma'am, we have calls from the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and, there's a pause, the Saudi embassy. James doesn't look up from her writing. Tell them all the same thing. The Attorney General is busy doing her job. As the sun sets over Albany, casting the Capitol building in golden light, Letitia James finishes the first draft of what will become known as the most consequential state prosecution of foreign officials in American history. The title page reads simply, "The People of the State of New York, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, et al., Criminal Conspiracy, Money Laundering, and Accessory to Mass Murder." Each paragraph is a masterpiece of legal precision, building an unshakable foundation that money laundering is a state crime regardless of the perpetrator's diplomatic status, that accessory to murder knows no sovereign immunity, that the blood of theirs New Yorkers demands justice even if the federal government prefers oil to accountability. At the bottom, in her careful signature, Letitia James, Attorney General, State of New York, seeking justice for 3,000 New Yorkers and 1 murdered journalist. Because in the end, that's what separates justice from politics. Justice remembers the names. Justice counts the cost. And justice never ever accepts that mass murder is just things that happen. The phone rings one more time. This time she answers. Attorney General James.
Miss James, this is the White House Chief of Staff. The president would like to discuss.
Then the president can call me himself. Her voice is ice over steel. And when he does, he can explain to me why he thinks New Yorkers should forget about September 11th just because it's diplomatically convenient. Ma'am, with all due respect, You're interfering with foreign policy. No, James's voice cuts through the line like a legal brief written in fire. I'm enforcing state law. The president can conduct foreign policy. I'll conduct prosecutions. And if those two things conflict, well, that's what the Constitution is for. She pauses, letting her words sink in. Tell the president that the state of New York doesn't negotiate with terrorists. We prosecute them, and anyone who helps them. She hangs up. The silence in the room is deafening. Even Sarah, who has spent decades fighting impossible legal battles, looks stunned. They've just witnessed a state attorney general declare war on the federal foreign policy establishment and win the first battle. In the distance, the lights of Manhattan begin to twinkle like stars, each one representing a life, a dream, a future that was either stolen on September 11th or changed forever by it. And in her office in Albany, Letitia James works through the night, writing the legal documents that will either restore faith in American justice or prove once and for all that power trumps truth. But she's betting on justice. Because in her experience, when you give truth a legal framework and a determined prosecutor, it has a way of winning fights that everyone said it couldn't win. The clock on her wall reads 11:47 p.m. when she finally sets down her pen and looks at the finished complaint. 47 pages of legal precision, each paragraph building an unshakable case that murder is not diplomacy, that money laundering is not charity, and that justice delayed is not justice denied. The document in her hands represents something more than legal action. It's a declaration of war against the idea that American lives are acceptable collateral damage for foreign policy convenience. It's a promise to every family that lost someone on September 11th that their government's amnesia is not permanent, that someone still remembers their names and refuses to let their deaths be dismissed as things that happen. Tomorrow, she'll file these papers. Tomorrow, the real battle begins. But tonight, for the first time in 24 years, the families of 3,000 victims can go to sleep knowing that someone in power finally cares more about justice than politics. And somewhere in the darkness, the ghost of every person who died on September 11th can rest a little easier, knowing that their attorney general has not forgotten their names, has not accepted their deaths as just things that happen, and will never ever stop fighting for the simple truth that murder is murder, no matter who commits it or who tries to excuse it. The marble floors of the New York State Capitol have witnessed many battles. But tomorrow, they'll witness something different, the sound of justice walking with purpose toward a fight it intends to win. Because that's what Letitia James does. She doesn't just talk about justice, she makes it happen. And tomorrow morning when she walks into that courthouse with her 47-page complaint, she'll be carrying more than just legal documents. She'll be carrying the hopes of every family that lost someone on September 11th, the voice of every murdered journalist whose killers thought they were untouchable, and the promise that in New York State, justice isn't just a word, it's a weapon. And she knows exactly how to use it.